Something happens right after you achieve something important. The satisfaction arrives, and then, faster than it should, it leaves, and you're already looking at the next thing. If that cycle sounds familiar, what we're going to look at today explains exactly why it never stops. You got the promotion, and within a week, the promotion felt ordinary. You finished the project, reached the goal, earned the number, and stood there waiting for the feeling to arrive. It didn't, or it did, briefly, and then it was gone faster than you expected. And now, you're already looking at the next thing, the next level, the next milestone that will finally make this feeling stop. It won't. And somewhere underneath all the achieving, you already know that. Something happens right after you achieve something important. The satisfaction arrives, and then, faster than it should, it leaves, and you're already looking at the next thing. If that cycle sounds familiar, what we're going to look at today explains exactly why it never stops. You got the promotion, and within a week, the promotion felt ordinary. You finished the project, reached the goal, earned the number, and stood there waiting for the feeling to arrive. It didn't, or it did, briefly, and then it was gone faster than you expected. And now, you're already looking at the next thing, the next level, the next milestone that will finally make this feeling stop. It won't. And somewhere underneath all the achieving, you already know that. Before we look at how it shows up, we need to understand where it comes from, because this pattern doesn't begin in adulthood. It doesn't begin with career pressure or social comparison or the highlight reel of other people's lives. It begins in childhood, specifically in the gap between who you were and what was required of you to receive love, approval, or safety. When a child grows up in an environment where love or approval was contingent on performance, on being good enough, smart enough, quiet enough, successful enough, thin enough, well-behaved enough, the developing mind draws a conclusion that feels like fact. I am not enough as I am. Something about me needs to be fixed, improved, achieved, or hidden before I deserve to be here. This conclusion doesn't stay in childhood. It becomes the operating system. The child grows up, gets a job, a relationship, a life that looks, from the outside, like evidence that they are, in fact, enough. And the operating system ignores all of that evidence because it wasn't built to evaluate evidence. It was built to maintain a conclusion, and it does its job extremely well. And here is what makes this particularly difficult. The people who carry this pattern are often the highest achievers in every room they enter. The pattern doesn't make them stop trying. It makes them try harder, because the trying is the only thing that temporarily quiets the feeling. The achievement doesn't fill the hole, but the pursuit of achievement at least gives the feeling somewhere to go. The never enough pattern doesn't show up the same way in every person, but there are 5 consistent expressions, 5 ways it moves through a life, each one looking different on the surface, each one running from exactly the same root. The first expression is the one most people recognize, the person who cannot stop, who finishes one goal and immediately needs the next one, for whom vacations feel like punishment, for whom rest feels like failure, for whom the weekend is something to survive rather than enjoy, because without the doing, the feeling descends, and the feeling is unbearable. This person is not driven by ambition. They are driven by the terror of what happens when they stop. Because when they stop, when the noise of achievement goes quiet, what's left is just them, undecorated by productivity. And without the productivity, they don't know who they are. Or worse, they do know, and they believe what they find isn't enough. So the work continues. The rest never comes. And the exhaustion is the price they pay for never having to find out. The first expression is the one most people recognize, the person who cannot stop, who finishes one goal and immediately needs the next one, for whom vacations feel like punishment, for whom rest feels like failure, for whom the weekend is something to survive rather than enjoy, because without the doing, the feeling descends, and the feeling is unbearable. This person is not driven by ambition. They are driven by the terror of what happens when they stop. Because when they stop, when the noise of achievement goes quiet, what's left is just them, undecorated by productivity. And without the productivity, they don't know who they are. Or worse, they do know, and they believe what they find isn't enough. So the work continues. The rest never comes. And the exhaustion is the price they pay for never having to find out. The second expression is perfectionism, but not the perfectionism of high standards. The perfectionism of someone who believes that if their output is imperfect, they are imperfect. That if what they produce has flaws, then they are the flaw. So, the work is never finished, the email is revised 17 times, the project is delayed because it isn't ready, the creative work is never shared because it doesn't meet a standard that was designed to never be met. The perfectionist isn't protecting quality, they're protecting themselves from judgment, because if the work is never released, it can never be evaluated as insufficient. If the email is never sent, no one can find it wanting. The perfectionism isn't a standard, it's a shield. And the exhausting part, the part that nobody sees, is how much energy it takes to hold that shield up year after year while telling yourself it's just about doing things well. The third expression is people-pleasing, the compulsive need to be what other people need, to agree when you disagree, to help when you're depleted, to make yourself smaller or quieter or more palatable to avoid the possibility of rejection. This isn't kindness. Kindness has limits. This has none. This is the structural belief that your own needs, opinions, and presence are less valid than other people's comfort, and that making someone uncomfortable is a form of failure. People pleasers are almost never people who don't care about themselves. They are people who were taught, directly or implicitly, that caring about themselves was selfish, dangerous, or likely to result in abandonment. So they learned to read rooms, to anticipate needs, to smooth over conflict before it started, skills that look like sensitivity, skills that are actually survival strategies. And the cost of maintaining them over a lifetime is the gradual erosion of any clear sense of who you actually are when nobody's watching. The fourth expression is imposter syndrome, the persistent feeling that your success is undeserved, that you've fooled everyone, that at some point the truth will come out and the people around you will realize you were never as capable as they thought. This isn't limited to beginners or people early in their careers. Some of the most accomplished people in any field carry this feeling most acutely, because the more they've achieved, the more there is to lose when the truth is finally revealed. Imposter syndrome isn't about competence, it's about a core belief that whatever you've achieved happened despite who you are, not because of it. That you got lucky, that you were in the right place, that the achievement and the self are separate, that the self, unadorned by the achievement, is insufficient. And because the achievement can always be taken away by failure, by comparison, by circumstance, the feeling of insufficiency is always one setback away from being confirmed. The fifth expression shows up in relationships, in the person who can never quite believe they are truly loved, who needs constant reassurance, who interprets normal silence as evidence of rejection, who, when someone loves them steadily and reliably, finds a way to test that love or push it away, because steady, reliable love feels suspicious. It doesn't match the template, and the template says that love has to be earned, that it can be withdrawn, that it requires maintenance and performance to remain. 5 expressions. 1 mechanism. What connects the achiever who can't rest, the perfectionist, the people pleaser, the imposter, and the person who can't receive love is a single core belief operating below conscious awareness. I am conditionally acceptable. My worth depends on what I do, how I perform, who I satisfy. Remove the performance, and nothing remains that deserves to be here. This belief has a particular cruelty to it. It responds to achievement by raising the bar. Every time you reach the standard, whatever standard you've set, the belief doesn't say you've arrived. It says the bar was too low. It recalibrates upward just beyond where you are so that the feeling of insufficiency can be preserved. The evidence of enough never registers as enough. Because the belief isn't evaluating evidence, it's selecting it. Psychologists call this a core schema, a foundational belief about the self that organizes how incoming information is processed. Schemas don't update the way rational beliefs do. They filter. They amplify the evidence that confirms them and discount the evidence that contradicts them, which is why a person can receive 10 genuine compliments and 1 criticism, and the criticism is the only thing they remember the next day. The schema isn't processing randomly, it's processing selectively, in service of a conclusion it was built to protect. This is the part that needs to be said clearly. Achievement cannot fix this, not because achievement is meaningless, it isn't, but because the wound this pattern comes from was never created by a lack of achievement. It was created by the experience of conditional worth, and it can only be addressed at that level, not by adding more achievements to the pile, but by examining the belief that the pile was supposed to replace something. The hedonic treadmill, the psychological phenomenon where every achievement returns you to your baseline feeling, is not a character flaw. It's a feature of how the human reward system works. Every person experiences some version of it. But for people carrying the never enough pattern, the return to baseline doesn't feel neutral. It feels like confirmation. The happiness passed, which means it was never real, which means I was right all along. The treadmill becomes evidence for the belief. What changes, this is not more achievement. It is not better performance. It is not finding the right relationship or the right salary or the right acknowledgement from the right person. What changes this, slowly, imperfectly, non-linearly, is something most high achievers find almost impossible: the willingness to question whether the core belief is true, not to disprove it, not to fight it, but to hold it up to the light and ask, where did this come from? Who taught me this? And is the person who taught it to me a reliable source of information about my worth? The answer, almost always, is no. The core belief of conditional worth was formed by people who were themselves carrying unexamined wounds, by parents who confused love with performance because that's how they were loved, by environments that valued output because they didn't know how to value presence, by systems that rewarded doing because they had no language for being. The source of the belief was not a verdict on your worth, it was a reflection of someone else's wound, and you have been living inside their conclusion ever since. This doesn't resolve quickly. Core schemas built in childhood don't dissolve from a single insight, but the insight matters because it creates the first genuine crack in a belief that presented itself as fact. You cannot challenge what you cannot see. Once you see it, once you can identify the belief as a belief rather than as truth, the relationship between you and it begins to shift. Not immediately, not completely, but in a direction that no achievement ever could have moved it. The person who never feels like enough is almost never someone who has done too little. They are almost always someone who has been told, directly or through the accumulated weight of conditional love, that what they are, before the doing begins, is not sufficient. That message was wrong. it was always wrong. But it was delivered at an age when you had no framework to evaluate it, no resources to question it, and no choice but to absorb it as fact. The next video goes back into the specific intersection of this pattern and money, why people who never feel like enough often have a particular and painful relationship with financial success, how the same wound that drives the relentless achieving quietly caps what the achieving is allowed to produce. If today's video found something in you, that finding is the beginning of something. Subscribe, and I'll see you there.